Up next is Gale Wall, who's going to take us on a digital cemetery walk. Cemeteries offer an afternoon of discovery. Every stone has a story. They're just waiting to be told.
This is one of the first graves that I can remember photographing. It was taken in 1977, and it would be more than 20 years before my travel plans intentionally included cemetery walks. My journey begins in 1999 when I became interested in my family history. My research included visiting cemeteries to document the burial of my ancestors. And along the way, I began to notice other things. Also, I've noticed that the time and elements and vandalism are taking a toll on our cemeteries. In 2004, I began to photograph for preservation purposes. If it's a large cemetery, I begin with the older stones. There are some incredible pieces of art that mark the resting places, and I've seen some that take my breath away and some that make my heart sad. They are beautifully carved stones with lifelike features and details. One of my future projects will be to research some of the stone carvers themselves. And monument companies were not always the only place to purchase a headstone. For many decades, you could order one from Sears and Montgomery Ward catalogs. Grave guards and arches became available in the 1897 Sears Fall Catalog, and Sears issued a special tombstone catalog annually from 1902 to 1949. An interesting find in cemeteries I visited on the East Coast and southern states are headstones with death heads or winged heads and soul effigies. A symbol for death, danger, or dead, as well as piracy. A death head usually consists of a skull and two long crossbones. The Monumental Bronze Company of Bridgeport, Connecticut produced cast zinc grave markers sold as white bronze from 1874 to 1914. The company had 3 subsidiaries, one in Detroit in 1881, and Chicago and Des Moines, Iowa. And it's very rare to find the markers with the actual locations on them. Many religious and secular symbols and emblems have adorned tombstones through the ages. Here we have a boat that represents a voyage or the crossing over. The hand represents the hand of God, and the link represents loss. Lambs are usually found on children's graves. Many headstones contain more than just names and dates. Epitaphs containing quotes and scriptures are often found on the older ones. This one from Nathan Grisby, his dying protest against the Democratic Party, is in Harper County. And the one for Charlie Troy on the far right has a part of a poem called My Child, and it begins with, I know his face is hid under the coffin lid. And it's a very sad one. Another interesting find on headstones would be their cause of death. And here we have Henry Harrison died of bullet wounds he received in the Battle of the Rio Grande. Harry Morgan died as a passenger conductor. And as a photographer, I love finding photographs on headstones. In my research, I found a document dated from 1874 which reported that the custom was gaining ground in placing photographic portraits of deceased persons on their gravestones. As we saw with the other slides, there are many headstones that contain emblems of secret societies, organizations, military service, clubs, hobbies, occupations, and other things that represent a person's life. I think that the term secret society is kind of mysterious. There have been countless organizations through the ages, and many of them are still in existence today. A photographic essay is a set or a series of photographs that intend to tell a story or evoke a series of emotions, and I like to do this to showcase the details. For many of the detailed stones, I like to photograph the features individually so that when they're presented in this manner, your eyes will rest on those features before moving on. Eastside Cemetery is the oldest in Hutchinson, but it's not the first. It was established in 1879 after it was moved from its original location in the neighborhood of 17th and Monroe. A ledger in City Hall dated 1880 discusses the number of bodies that needed to be moved. And in 1912, the Hutchinson News reported that construction had started on the first mausoleum to be built in the state of Kansas, here in Eastside Cemetery. It was to be built at a cost of $30,000, And later in the article, it talks about how science and skill work together to handle the gases and moisture issues. In Eastside is the grave of Maddie Franklin, and her life is one that I cannot imagine living because she married John Moore, and they had 5 children, and he murdered their children with an axe and then set their home on fire to cover his crime. She would later remarry and have additional children. Eastside is also the home of Talking Tombstones, which is an annual fundraiser for the Hutchinson Theater Guild. And since 2007, actors have portrayed the lives of over 50 people in Eastside. Many of them were prominent citizens that were responsible for the development of our city. In 2009, I coordinated a project with the Reno County Genealogical Society to place signs in 17 of our county cemeteries that did not have one. Through a grant and fundraising efforts, we were able to complete our project. This project was also shared with us by the Hutchinson News and the Clarion. And I have a small library of books that offer educational, entertaining, and information on cemeteries and symbolism. Some of my favorites are by Douglas Keister, and one locally here in the Heartland is called Soul in the Stone, Cemetery Art by John Gary Brown. And sometimes we find more than death in a cemetery. Sometimes we find love. John is a Civil War reenactor, and Kristen was a reporter for the Hutchinson News when they met in Eastside Cemetery during a headstone dedication. And they will be married this spring. To date, I have photographed over 360 cemeteries across 13 states that total thousands and thousands of images that I share on my 2 blogs, Digital Cemetery Walk and one for Eastside Cemetery. And I started to start my talk with, my name is Gale and I collect dead people, but instead I'll leave you with this. Cemeteries offer an afternoon of discovery, and remember that history remembers the famous, but genealogy remembers everyone.